Well, drafts are right around the corner, and there are some confusing position groups out there right now. We're going to dissect them and tell you which players to target and which to fade next on the IBT podcast.
Everybody want to talk this and that. They do a backdoor. I've been going dummy, out of bounds, putting on a clinic. Stick around, carrots in my hardware. KC, caught him in the crosshair. Look at me, been the guy, call him Mr. MVP. Keep your ass on the bench by my MPC. Earn my stripes like I fixed this league. Your dog's on the turf, my dog's in the street. You can find me somewhere in between. Never a dull moment like a movie scene. About to do the ops like I did this beat. Let them keep talking RG3. Coming to you live. This is the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right. It is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024, and this is the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, your destination for both some feel-good and refreshing takes on fantasy football and NFL betting. We're counting down the days until the season is back, and we're going to have some fun. Until then, my name is Seth Woolcock, and tonight I'm joined by a light ranching son of a bitch, Houston Texans mark, summertime Eric Romoff. What's up, Eric?
Man, summertime vibes are high, fresh out of the pool today, well back into the triple digits here in Central Texas. And that means that fantasy football season's right around the corner, right? I think we got like 70-ish days until the NFL kicks off. We got a lot of Scott Fishbowl drafts out there in the works right now. Mine is about a week away. So we're in the thick of it now, boys. It's time to mount up.
Mount up, baby. Let's go. We're also joined by the newest member of IBT. He's a senior at Purdue. He's crushing hearts, crushing natty lights, and crushing the last leg of your parlay. The intern, Will Starlipper. Will, how you doing tonight, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Talk some football. Working through making my career in sports. Quit my last job so I can talk more football. So anytime I can do that, I'll be happy to hop on here.
Hell yeah. Well, I just want to tell you, you have no fucking clue what you got yourself into, but we're happy you're here, man. And thanks for joining us tonight. Excited to kind of bring you along for this journey that is the IBT podcast. Tonight on the program, we're going to unveil a new segment, Depth Chart Drama. We're going to tell you who we're targeting, who we're fading in these crowded position groups. We're also going to do some between bets, get into our Heisman Trophy odds. We're not a college football program by any means. I will say that. However, I think it is important to keep in mind who's going to be good this year in the college football ranks from a dynasties perspective and in a Devy perspective. We're also going to be jonesing for a little fantasy football betting action after, Eric, you and I kind of already dissected all the NFL futures market. So happy to jump into some college football here with you tonight, my friend.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, right? We're reaching a little bit deeper into the college game so that if you're a Devy head, like you mentioned, or if you are still waiting for your rookie draft, or if you've just got your eyes set on the horizon for next year's class, plenty of guys that we'll be talking about here that will be on those fantasy football radars sooner rather than later.
And then we'll round it out tonight with a little off the top. That's our Cut 1 fantasy football and pop culture game. And running that will be our behind-the-scenes expert, proud Yinzer IUP alumnus, a guy I was literally with over the weekend and had to run from storms. They were in the distance. We could see them coming for us. We tried to make a sprint to the car without getting rained on. Hopefully the less damp producer, Kyle Scott, join us tonight. Kyle, how are we doing today, buddy?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, luckily I've had time to dry off after that torrential downpour. Seth and I were sprinting, like he said. We made a literal run for it, but we got caught in the storm. Auntie M, baby. You know, there were flying monkeys. It was looking rough out there, but it's the IBT podcast now, so things are looking mighty fine.
Absolutely. We got the IBT family joining us in the chat as well. We got Albert hanging out with us. Good evening, IBT. Good evening, Albert. Thanks for tuning in tonight, man. We got Mr. Scampers. Hello, IBT family. Hello, Mr. Scampers. We appreciate you as always. I know at one point Tuesday was his bowling night, so I don't know if he's on the lanes right now making time for us or he's put that in the past, but either way, we appreciate you, Scampers. We had a huge week on the channel last week. Many thanks to everyone for all the likes, the shares, the comments that helped us get there. The easiest way to support us if you're new to the channel is to subscribe. And if you aren't new, hey, just hit that thumbs up button. It does us a great deal here. And we're also just a few weeks away from doing our next giveaway, a Taysom Hill autographed jersey for the first 100 tickets of Draft Night Out sold. That's our fantasy football draft party in Canton, Ohio. The link for that is in the episode description. But Eric, you've been hanging on to this one for a while. We got to get rid of it. We're just about at 100 tickets sold. We have about 90 some. So I'm happy to get that out of your hands here in a couple weeks and get to Canton about a month or so from now.
Yeah, Canton's right around the corner, and I wouldn't be surprised if word got around and we actually sold out those last couple of tickets to 100 over the course of tonight's show. Right? People are getting excited about Taysom Hill. We've got Juwan Johnson dealing with injury already. Maybe there's a little bit of steam on Taysom Hill stock, or maybe people are just waking up to the fact that July is next week and it is time to book those DNO tickets. No time like the present. Get out there and scoop them up.
Will, I think you're going to be joining us at the Expo this year. Is that correct? I think you're going to make the trip in.
I did. I bought my ticket this morning, actually, so I'm excited to see what it's all about. I haven't been before, so.
Hell yeah. Yeah, Will's going to be camping out with us at the IBT house, Eric. And another thing, he just has no idea what he's getting into. Not only are we known for closing down the bars late, but also going a little bit later than that and then waking up at about 8 a.m. So no sleep till Brooklyn that weekend, Will. Just be prepared for that, my friend.
Hey, I'm still in my college years. I'm not washed up ready yet, so I'm ready.
I think he was pointing to you, Eric, because you didn't make it very late last season at all. I think you were in bed about 11 o'clock both nights, my friend.
No, I had a good night in my belt, and then it just completely wiped me out. Right, so fully washed, 100% certified, but still have a night or two in me. Trying to push that to maybe 3 nights for the Expo this year.
Oh, all right. Get a little karaoke in you on Sunday. Mr. Scamper saying no more Tuesday bowling for us. It's a sore subject. I'm sorry, Scamps. I won't bring it up anymore. I apologize about that. And his lovely wife, Dane, in the chat as well. Hello, IBT crew. Yeah, this is actually where I met Damon and Scampers in person, was on the rooftop 4 a.m. after hours. So, Scampers can confirm IBT can late night. That's what we're about. We go hard, but we work harder and we play hard as well. So, guys, let's go ahead. Let's jump into the episode. We got a lot to cover tonight, and let's get started here with a little depth chart drama.
Everybody want to talk this and that. They do a backdoor deal right behind your back. When they talk $100 million, all the drama going silly. Gotta get the bag fast, run it back like Willie. Like Willie. Like Willie. When they talk $100 million, all the drama going silly. Gotta get the bag coming on the bench like Willie.
All right, depth chart drama. We're going to be looking at who to target and who to fade out of these crowded position groups. I'll be honest, guys, I've been struggling myself a little bit, so I'm excited to hear Will and Eric's analysis with these groups. Let's start with the Houston Texans wide receivers. Nico Collins right now going about 19.4 overall in the Underdog Fantasy ADP, wide receiver 14. This guy was wide receiver 7 in points per game last season. Stefon Diggs also now kind of joins this fray after being a wide receiver 1 in 4 years straight, wide receiver 22 overall this season in Underdog ADP. And then Tank Dell, wide receiver 19 in points per game as a rookie before breaking his leg. He's going wide receiver 26 right now. Conventional wisdom tells me, Eric, that I want pieces of this offense with an ascending quarterback. They were 12th in yardage, 13th in scoring, and is just his rookie year. I just don't know which one to pick. Where can you lead us as IBT family members here, man? What do you got for us?
Man, speaking of conventional wisdom, the answer to all of these questions, generally speaking, is whichever one is the cheapest. At least that is my approach here for the Texans wide receiver core. I'm definitely getting to much more Tank Dell than either Nico Collins or Stefon Diggs. Part of that is where those two players are going in the drafts, wide receiver 14 and wide receiver 22 respectively. There are just a couple of other guys that I like more around them. So I finding myself with more Tank Dell. I think I'm going to continue to do that. In terms of who I think has the best season overall, I would put my money on Stefon Diggs. And I've mentioned this on these airways before. Like, the Texans don't go out and expend the capital they did to bring him in. They don't go out and essentially renegotiate or restructure his entire deal so that he is an unrestricted free agent as soon as next year, unless they're planning on making him very happy and making him a focal point of this offense. So I think we're going to see pretty sterling fantasy seasons from all three of these guys, but I do think that the heights will be a bit higher for Stefon Diggs, but like the value on Tank Dell just a bit more.
Okay. I'm with you on the Tank Dell buying kind of low here a little bit. We've seen his ADP drop a ton since Diggs was signed from earlier in the offseason when we were doing those big dog tournaments and things like that. So I am with you there. I'm not sure I'm as bought in on Stefon Diggs. Will, where do you land on them? Because we know Nico Collins just got the bag here in recent weeks as well.
Yeah, I've drafted maybe 25, 30 teams or so. I would say that I have probably ended up with the most shares of Tank Dell out of this group because of his range. Although I do like a lot of the guys going in Tank Dell's range, George Pickens and Amari Cooper specifically. I don't know if I've drafted Stefon Diggs yet, and it has more to do with the people around him. Like I said, there's DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Devontae Smith, Cooper Kupp. I like a lot of those guys more. And for Stefon Diggs, I mean, he gave us one double-digit performance after week 9 of last season, and it's just hard to look at that. You know, you're the best, by far the clear wide receiver 1 with Josh Allen as your quarterback, and obviously they had, you know, offensive coordinator changes and stuff, but I just find it hard to buy into a 30-year-old receiver that showed us, you know, he's falling down the cliff a little bit, and there's a whole lot of yapping around, you know, what the real issue was there. But for me, I do like Nico Collins. I think he will be the leading receiver in this room. I mean, he averaged more points per game than A.J. Brown did last year. I think he's got a really good chance to leave this room. They just gave him the bag. But when it gets to like Stefon Diggs at wide receiver 22, I mean, I just look at him. It's like I like all the guys around him a lot more. And like Eric said, I can just get a piece of Tank Dell in the next round or two. So I'm not the biggest on Stefon Diggs here. I do like the other guys. Obviously Tank Dell with the value there, but have not been drafting any Stefon Diggs.
Eric, do you find yourself going completely fading Nico Collins? I know you were heavily fading him earlier this offseason when he was right around that 1-2 turn. His ADP was skyrocketing, and this kind of brought it back down. Like, are you complete fade of Nico since you are a little bit higher on Stefon than Will and myself?
No, not at all. Right. To your original point, I think finding ways to get into this Houston Texans offense is a profitable position to take, right? You know, it's really just a matter, at least with Nico Collins in particular, a lot of it depends on where you fall in terms of your draft position, right? To your point earlier, when he was, I think at one point, like the 12th player off the board, that was a bit too rich. Now he's, you know, towards the middle to back end of the second round. I think his price is spot on. I am a bit worried in terms of how his season plays out in this new look offense, right? Like I think Tank Dell's role is probably the most isolated of these three. We know how they're going to use him. You know, we shouldn't see Stefon Diggs really infringe upon that very much. And Nico Collins, for as fantastic a season as he had, a lot of those, you know, those biggest games that vaulted him to the finish that you mentioned earlier came after Tank Dell was out for the season with a broken leg, right? I think he had one top 5 performance prior to that point. So, you know, I love the player. I love the way the front office approached his extension and got him in before we saw some of these huge receiver contracts hit the market. But for this upcoming season, in terms of where he falls in that pecking order, it's a legitimate question mark. So
Okay.
he's certainly the one I'm getting to the least of the three. But again, a lot of it is just where am I stacking Texans and where do I fall in terms of draft position.
Okay. I think the point to underscore here is that all three of us are in on Tank Dell, his current ADP. I think he's the one that's probably our favorite. And Eric, as you alluded to, Tank was kind of out producing Nico at different times while they were both healthy last season. So something to keep in mind there. Love it, guys. Let's move forward to the San Francisco 49ers wide receiver core here. And oh man, this has become very interesting over the last couple of weeks here. Brandon Aiyuk, unhappy with his contract situation, taking things very personal, it seems. Wide receiver 15 in points per game last season. Currently the wide receiver 12 off the board in underdog fantasy drafts. Deebo Samuel, of course, still in this wide receiver room, as well as in the backfield occasionally as well. Wide receiver 13 in points per game last season. We do know he can get nicked and bruised a little bit, taking on that dual threat role, but we still know what this guy's ceiling is. Wide receiver 3 all the way back in 2021. And then there's Ricky Pearsall, who's going to join the fray this season. The rookie out of Florida, wide receiver 66 off the boards in underdog drafts. He was 6th in the SEC in receptions and receiving yards last season. I personally worry if Brandon Aiyuk even figures out the contract situation and stays put in San Francisco, that maybe there's some regression just because he was so efficient on just 105 targets last season. Now we add Ricky Pearsall to the group and upgrade at the wide receiver 3 position. How do you see this shaking out, my friend?
Yeah, it's tough because there is, I think, going to be, if Aiyuk stays in San Francisco, he's not the most consistent player, but he gives you a ton of big weeks. And like over the past few seasons, outside of Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb, nobody has more deep balls on or catches 20 plus yards down the field than Brandon Aiyuk, and he's been doing that on 70 less targets than guys like Tyreek and CeeDee Lamb. And there's a few guys like Aiyuk's range is in that really tough round 2 wide receiver range where realistically some of those guys I think have a case to be, they could be wide receiver 11, they could be wide receiver 19. I think there's a really big tier there.
Yeah.
So a lot of those guys going near him, I think, Drake London and Chris Olave, we don't really know what we're going to get from them. Davante Adams showed a little bit of regression. And then obviously we just talked about Nico Collins. We saw a bit of a breakout from Aiyuk last season, and he has the highest ADP. But if there's so many mouths to feed here, if I do want a piece of this, I do draft Brandon Aiyuk often, and I actually find myself getting a lot of 49ers stacks, getting Purdy later,
Yep, agreed.
and even Kittle. And then when that happens and we get to Ricky Pearsall range, there's another guy that I like to add because especially if I have like an Aiyuk and Purdy stack, it's like, all right, I'm not really worried. If Aiyuk does get traded, he could end up in an even better situation with the Bills or the Chargers or somebody like that. So I'm not too worried about him. But obviously, if he isn't there, Ricky Pearsall, having him on my team, if Aiyuk does get traded, we could see Ricky Pearsall shoot up 20, 25 receivers in the rankings. As for Deebo, I really don't have much to like back up. It's kind of just like a gut feeling. I've owned Deebo Samuel the past 2 seasons. I think he's all over the place, and I just haven't been taking much of him because, like I keep on saying, he goes around a lot of those elite round 2 wide receivers that I just have a lot more faith in.
Yeah, it's very interesting with Deebo. I like him just because of the price tag, especially like last week we did our Scott Fishbowl mock draft and he fell, I think, a whole round later than Brandon Aiyuk did. So that's what kind of intrigues me about Deebo. The injury risk is real. Like I'm not projecting him to play 17 games. I think you're kind of a fool to do that. I think you need to project him probably for 15. I know some people do always project every player for 17. I do not. But Eric, I think the one thing for me to underline in this group, whether you like Deebo or Aiyuk better, is I think you should be drafting Ricky Pearsall, whether that's in best balls or redrafts, if you're going to draft one of these 49ers wide receivers, not only because maybe there's a Brandon Aiyuk trade, but more importantly, he's legit wide receiver handcuff. I know it doesn't always translate to more targets, but a first round rookie. We know we have Jacob Coing out there as well, coming from Arizona. But I really like Pearsall in case we do see Deebo or Aiyuk go down at some point.
Yeah, that's definitely a salient point, right? If you're investing in either of these pass catchers, you can adjust your rankings on Pearsall and move him up 10, 12, 15 spots so that you're very likely to get him by reaching a little bit. The point that you brought up in terms of wide receiver handcuffs is bang on, right? Like, it's typically not a strategy that we see being all that fruitful, but we're not talking about an instance where one of these guys gets hurt, right? I think there is a very real likelihood that one of these two players, Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel, are not on the 49ers at the start of the season, or at least very early into the season. And if that's the case, that just creates a void and a vacuum that Pearsall is primed to step into. So definitely agree with that point, although it's a bit atypical to kind of conventional wisdom at the position. Of the two sort of current starters of Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel, the thing for me that makes it kind of tricky is really we're just trying to piece together which of these two is more likely to be traded. I think San Francisco kind of signaled their intent that one of them is on their way out by drafting Ricky Pearsall. And of the two, I think it's probably Deebo Samuel heading out the door, right? He's older than Aiyuk.
Really?
Now that it's after June 1st, the way that his contract is structured, I think the 49ers can save like $20+ million in terms of the cap hit to either cutting him, which obviously wouldn't happen, or trading him to another team. So, with that, like, yes, the way that Deebo is used is interesting, right? It's exciting from a fantasy standpoint, but also he's kind of in the perfect situation for his skill set, and where he goes could potentially drag down his fantasy production pretty considerably. You'd almost have to fall into an offense that is of the Shanahan tree, and you start running down those coaches and OCs, and there aren't a whole lot of them that have a need at the position. They've already prioritized wide receiver. So he's either going to go to a place where he fits the system and it's very crowded, or he's going to go to a place where it's not crowded, but he doesn't fit the system all that well. So, of the three, Deebo's kind of the odd man out for me, because I do think that he's the most likely to leave San Francisco and probably face a bit of a downgrade wherever he lands.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think I'm kind of, right in the middle with you guys. I hate to always be the middleman, but between us, but like, I do worry a little bit that Aiyuk, as I said, kind of regresses, maybe just because the efficiency was so off the chart. And I feel like he is.
But that's kind of his game, though, right? Like, he's been doing it on like 100, 110 targets over the last couple of years, right? Like, I think there's a real likelihood that we can pencil him in for 107 targets this year, if not more, right? And he's able to do a lot with that. So I think we've got a large enough sample with him where we're not looking at a flash in the pan or an outlier. Like, he's showing us he can produce on that type of volume.
Okay. All right. Let's move to the Chicago Bears wide receivers. And this is another very curious case because we have DJ Moore, who was the alpha wide receiver in this offense last year, wide receiver 21 off the board right now, kind of starting to see his ADP slide back more into the mid-third round as opposed to the late second, as we were seeing earlier this offseason. Keenan Allen, wide receiver 33 right now off the board. We know he's aging, but gracefully, I think we can say about Keenan Allen. And then Rome Odunze, the talented rookie out of Washington, going off the board, wide receiver 38. Common sense tells me, Eric, that I think I'm most in on Keenan Allen at the current price, just because I think, yes, he's the old head here, but I think he's going to see the most slot action. And I think with a rookie quarterback, that could be something Caleb Williams leans on early in his rookie year. Am I wrong for that thought?
For my money, I think you're bang on. That is at least how I'm approaching this wide receiver room, right? I said earlier that generally looking to the least expensive guy is kind of my default. But in the case of Chicago, we're seeing Keenan Allen's ADP slide a little bit. We're seeing Rome Odunze's start to creep up a little bit to where they're kind of pinched at a relatively negligible difference in terms of their draft position.
Sure.
And to your point, I think we look at what this front office did. You go out and get a player like Keenan Allen so that he can be a support system, a safety blanket for your rookie quarterback. So in the context of best ball, in the context of redraft, I like Keenan Allen to lead this wide receiver room in targets. He could make a push for leading this trio in terms of fantasy production. But if he doesn't, I think he's going to be comparable to DJ Moore, but you're getting him 25 picks later, which is just too much value to pass up.
Will, where do you stand on these wide receivers? Are you higher on Rome Odunze? You are the young bull of the group. Are you going with the rookie here, or do you like the proven veteran in DJ Moore? Or are you going with the old head here, like Eric and I are?
I've been one of the biggest Keenan Allen guys for the past few years. It was one of my best takes last year. I thought his value was ridiculous, and it worked out. He was
Eric was
top
too.
5 points per game. I don't like him this year. It comes, obviously, you have a crowded receiver room, and I don't think, they brought in Shane Waldron, an offensive coordinator from Seattle, and he kind of ruined Jackson Smith and Jigba to me, and
Good point.
tried to use him with short slot screens, just not giving us what we wanted for fantasy football aspects. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he tries to do that with Keenan Allen. I could see Keenan Allen being a guy that gets 8 targets, 6 catches for 50 yards, and I don't think he's going to be scoring touchdowns. That's never really been his game. Obviously last year they didn't have anyone else to throw to, but I think the touchdowns here are going to go to DJ Moore. I think he is going to be the alpha guy here. Obviously they're going to spread it out. It's a crowded receiving room with a bunch of studs. But I think DJ Moore's ADP is completely fair. I just find myself trying to find more upside in Keenan Allen's range with guys like Chris Godwin, who I actually think is going to have a bounce back season. Terry McLaurin, one of the most consistent receivers. That he's going to give you 1,000 yards and 5-6 touchdowns at worst with all the bad quarterbacks
Sure.
he's had. Jaden Reed had a great rookie season last year. Maybe he could be the wide receiver 1 in this loaded Packers offense. I just think Keenan Allen, I guess from a redraft point of view, completely fine, streamable option that is going to be consistent for you, and he's not going to hurt your lineup. I just don't see the big boom weeks and the big upside, especially for best ball. So I just don't see myself taking too much of Keenan Allen because I think he's going to be, the safety guy, the short guy, like I said, 6 catches, 60 yards, consistent, but at that range, I'm kind of looking for boom guys, and I just don't find myself taking them.
Very fair. Very fair. I didn't even factor in Shane Waldron and how he used JSN last season. It was very disappointing.
He's going to tank one of the 3 of them's values, right? And
yeah.
I think largely consensus is that DJ Moore should be fine. So we're trying to figure out which of the other 2 are the ones that they're going to get the Waldron touch.
Yeah. Hopefully for my sake, it's Rome. I don't have a ton of Rome right now. I have much more Keenan and DJ. We got Uncle Ted just fucking spamming the chat right now. What's up, Uncle Ted? Good to see you, man. We appreciate you, buddy. He's saying Quentin was going to take away too many targets from Keenan Allen. No, he wasn't. Get out of here with that.
People were hyped up on Quentin Johnson, and then they saw that he can't catch and promptly dropped all of that hype. Intriguing value in best ball this year. I find myself throwing some darts at Quentin Johnston, and it doesn't feel good, but developing your hands between year 1 and year 2 is not completely out of the range of outcomes, right?
Yeah. Uncle Ted, another crazy, I don't want to say it's a crazy take, but saying Cole Kmet will be leaned on heavily. I think he'll be a safety blanket, but I don't think there's the upside for Cole Kmet this year, right, guys? He's really fallen down in the pecking order, probably to the 4th option rather than the 2nd option, right? Am I missing something? I've never, I was the guy who got clipped a couple years ago saying fuck Cole Kmet, and I'm, his mom won't follow me back on Instagram still. We don't have a great relationship, but regardless, he's the 4th target here, maybe 5th behind Swift. I don't know.
I picked up Gerald Everett too. Watch out.
Yeah. And he's one of Waldron's buddies too. Waldron likes him a lot. So yeah,
right along with him.
Yeah. No Cole Kmet for me this year, Uncle Ted. No Cole Kmet ever really for me, but especially not this season. All right, let's round out this discussion here with the Denver Broncos backfield. Javonte Williams is still leading the charge here, presumably. Didn't look like the same player, though, last year, boys. really did not look like the same guy that we thought he was going to be heading into last season after the torn ACL. Still going off the board, RB31. We've heard whispers that maybe he could even be released this offseason. I don't know if that was just some, offseason fodder to get us excited. But Jaleel McLaughlin, OTA hype king right now. This guy, every positive report from the beat reporters out of the Mile High City is saying this guy could be something special in Sean Payton's offense. He's an undrafted free agent from last season. RB48 off the board. Then we have Audric Estime coming over from Notre Dame, RB67. Then Samaje Perine, who we thought Sean Payton loved after giving a pretty sizable deal early in free agency last year. Will, where do you lean on this Denver Broncos backfield? It's kind of a mixed bag here. You're not paying up for really any of them, but it's still crowded as hell and hard to parse through, really.
Yeah, I have a pretty strong opinion on this one. Just off the bat, super messy. I think Javonte Williams, his ADP is way, way too high for me. I don't really see the upside here. He was bad last year. He was outside the top 40 in PFF grade, outside the top 40 in rush yards over expected per attempt. He was bad. Obviously, he was coming off an injury, but not only was he bad, like this is a messy backfield on a super bad offense. I think they'll be one of the worst in the NFL. And I think people forget that Sean Payton and this coaching staff didn't draft Javonte Williams. Like they went out and got Jaleel. They went out and got Audric Estime in this year's draft. And it comes once again, I say this again, the guys that he's going around with, I would take 100 times out of 100 over him because, it's Devin Singletary and Tajay Spears, Blake Corum, who's an immediate RB1 if Kyron were to go down, Brian Robinson, who I think has a ton of upside. There's guys like Zeke Elliott and Jerome Ford.
Agreed.
At like RB40, who I think have way more upside than Javonte Williams, whether it's because of their offense or their lack of competition or whatever. I don't think I've ever drafted Javonte Williams this season, and I'm not going to. And I like Jaleel at his ADP because he's going around, he's just going around handcuffs, and I think there's a chance. Obviously, he's getting training camp hype, or not training camp, but OTA hype.
Yeah.
And I think there's a chance that he could end up being the guy. He could end up being the guy with a lot of receiving upside. He was extremely underrated last year. I mean, he gave us a few good weeks, but like as a runner with minimum of 50 rush attempts, he was second in yards per carry, fifth in missed tackles forced per attempt.
Okay.
As a receiver, he was fifth in yards per route run. I just think there's a lot of upside, and we saw a lot of efficiency for a guy that, you don't have to spend like anything on. Whereas Javonte Williams being drafted right now, like he's the clear starter on a bad team with a ton of competition that we don't even know how much they'll use Samaje Perine and Audric Estime. So Javonte's gross to me.
Yeah, Eric, it's tough for me to get behind Javonte as well. This kind of feels like Jaleel to me, watching him last year to the eye test, kind of reminds me of like a rookie Jalen Warren, kind of a shifty guy, came out of nowhere. A Jaleel undrafted, Jalen 7th round type of guy, can catch, can make some different moves, and just seems like an overall good player to have on the field. The offense is efficient when he was on the field. Where do you land? Are we dogging Javonte too much? You got a little hype for the UNC guy?
No, I do not.
Wow.
Flatly put, right? Like there isn't really anything that we've seen, certainly on his tape last year, or even prior to that point, right? Like he would flash every now and again, but I mean, there's nothing on his film that there's really going to get you excited about. And the answer to this question is in the question itself. If we're talking about a decision between 4 different running backs, none of them are guys that you should be investing a roughly top 100 pick in, right? Like it's going to be muddy. This offense played at a pretty slow pace last year. They were a little bit below league average in terms of run plays per game. Their offensive line was just kind of meh, right around league average as well in terms of PFF rating. So, it's going to be gross to roster anybody in his backfield. So you want to go with the cheaper guys. I'm a little annoyed that, the OTA reporting comes out, right? Jaleel is dusting people.
Yeah.
and out there crossing over cones and stuff like that. And his ADP has jumped up like almost 20 spots in the last 5 weeks, right? So part of the reason why we say get out there and draft early is that these ADPs can be fickle, right? So
Sure.
right now you're probably going to pay close to top dollar for Jaleel McLaughlin, but maybe there's some shining reports on Estime, or Javonte gets a little love, or Jaleel gets an ingrown toenail or something, and we see him slide back to that like 170 range where we were getting him through most of June and May, and that is choice, right? I can't even really double back on any of the efficiency points that Will made, because they were spot on, right? Like the thing that I'll add is that he was 6th in terms of yards created per touch. Basically, when he
Love
had the
that.
ball in the hand, what he was able to create himself by way of a broken tackle or a juke or whatever it might be. So if we see him even just get an incremental increase in workload, then we should see pretty significant fantasy production piling up for him, even though he's very likely to be in a split backfield.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I'm right on with you guys. I think we finally have a little consensus here.
Lock it in.
If we are drafting someone out of this backfield, it is Jaleel. But as Eric said, we would like that ADP to go down just a little bit, I'm sure by the time redrafts come around, if he's still getting some hype in preseason, I mean, he could be looking, RB 42, RB 40. Like he might be going, which then I don't know if I'm paying that for him, honestly, just because
he can still get steamed up, but also past his prologue, right? They're going to be 5, 6, 15 other guys that get some positive reporting on them and start to steam up, and he'll kind of fall by the wayside again, right? So
we need some quad
have to bide your time a little bit with him.
Yeah, we need some quad picks of some other guys, the Mike Davises of the world this season. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate the discussion on that. Let's go ahead and let's transition here to laying out some future bets, this time for some college football with our Heisman look ahead here in between bets.
Between bets. Between bets.
All right, between bets, next week we're going to have Mike over there from the South Harmon gang joining us. He's going to help us break down the entire 2025 rookie class and who we should be paying attention to in the college football realm. So tonight we're just going to take a little edge off the top here, and we're going to look at some Heisman winner odds. Carson Beck is the favorite at plus 750 over there at FanDuel. Quinn Ewers, Dylan Gabriel transfer to Oregon. Ohio State, Will Howard, he's a transfer as well. Those are kind of the top guys here in the odds. You can find it all over at Betting Pros. They have a great players future board that you can check out as well for more information and really track these odds. Eric, how do you feel about the Heisman in general? Because to me, it's one of my favorite markets to invest in for college football futures. We obviously have like to make and to miss the college football playoffs this year. So a lot of great markets from the NCAA football, but Heisman, it's always just something special to me and something I do like to corner a little bit.
Yeah, I think the nature of how we see the Heisman play out, coupled with the fact that, apart from 2 or 3 guys, the field is pretty wide open and priced accordingly, right? Like every single year we'll see 2 or 3 or 4 players that are at the award ceremony that were on next to nobody's radar, right? So, or rather speculating in some of these longer odds guys, right? Being able to get, 20 to 1, 35 to 1, 18 to 1 even, right? Like these are the type of price tags that you want to target whenever you're talking about player versus the field type of propositions. And then you layer on top of that the fact that a lot of this is subjective, right? Like there are objective things that people can quantify, but also there's kind of a feel in terms of who actually gets these votes, and it feels like it's ripe for some pretty swingy bets to add to your profile.
I love it. And the one thing to keep in mind here too, we talk a lot about it on our NASCAR program, is that if you bet on FanDuel, and like we're not paid to say this at all. We don't have a promo with FanDuel, but they will give you some very generous cash out offers later in the year. So if you have a 65 to 1, a 100 to 1 that they think, hey, even he might just be a finalist, you're probably getting a cash out by November. So that's something to keep in mind if you do want to take a couple of these long shots. And if you want to go with the chalk, make sure you're checking out DraftKings, which is one of our very valued betting partners. We have a promo link in this episode description. You can check them out. Deposit $10, get 200 in free bets. So hell of a deal over there. Will, I want to start with you, man. Where are you going in the Heisman Trophy odds? What are you seeing as potential value on the board for the potential winner of this award?
Yeah, it's a pretty wide open one this season, I think. I mean, I think I remember placing a Caleb Williams one last season before the season, and it was, I want to say, like plus 125. So you don't see
holy shit.
You don't see anyone favored, or maybe 225, but you don't see anyone favored like that this season. If I was going to go deep for a guy, if I was going to put some money on like a deep guy, I would probably stick to NFL. Because I know a lot more about that than college football. But Jalen Milroe for me at plus 1,400. He's the fourth most favorited Heisman candidate. But he finished sixth in Heisman voting last season. And obviously being on Alabama is going to be a helpful thing. But, you know, they brought in the Washington head coach who had Michael Penix in that offense absolutely pumping. Michael Penix, if I'm not mistaken, was the runner-up, I think, for Heisman last season. So I think we could see a lot of good usage there for Jalen Milroe's case. And they have a new offensive coordinator in Nick Sheridan, who has worked with the Washington head coach. And I think that Jalen Milroe is going to be asked to throw the football a lot more this season. And obviously he lost some weapons, but I think we can all trust that Alabama is going to have some solid guys at receiver for him. So I like the Jalen Milroe case here.
Okay, Jalen Milroe is where our guy Will is going to go. Eric, where are you going here? Are you sticking with a quarterback? Do you like maybe a positional player? We know it's traditionally a quarterback award, but hey, Devonta Smith won it at one point as well.
Yeah, I am going with a quarterback. I'm going to, like I mentioned a moment ago, I'm going to go a little bit deeper for my speculation in these types of markets. And specifically, the player that's jumping out to me is Shedeur Sanders, plus 3,500.
Buffs.
Obviously, Colorado didn't finish the season the way that they would have liked in a way that aligned with the amount of attention and hype that they got at the start of the season. But if you go back to those first 3, 4, 5 weeks of the year last year, there was already talk about him getting some Heisman consideration if you were able to sustain that play over the course of the year. Now you fast forward one more year, he's got another year in the system. The offensive line could legitimately only get better, right? So, like, to my point earlier about how some of this is subjective and what really kind of jumps off the page for the voter's eye, if we're talking about a Colorado team that's competitive, maybe even sneaks their way into the playoff or at least is in the playoff conversation, and it comes off of the arm of Shedeur Sanders, 35 to 1 is going to look real nice if we see that play out come, Christmas time or so. So, not exactly a strong favorite by any means. This feels like a bit more of a quarter or half unit type of bet, but
sure,
ultimately I think there's a path where we can see him at least making his way into that conversation if things break in the right direction for him this year.
What I think's interesting about Sanders, Deion's son here is they open with a very favorable schedule the first 3 weeks: North Dakota State, Nebraska, Colorado State. I know I'm going to piss off some people down in Lincoln, but I'm not really buying that hype quite yet under Matt Roll and company. So I think if he starts out hot here, like I remember last year, a couple weeks into the season, Eric, Shedeur being all the way down, I think 9 to 1 to win the Heisman. So this could be one you jump on earlier and maybe get a cash out option here by mid-September, potentially even. Baylor's going to come in week 4. I think that's going to be probably a big test for them. And then they'll see UCF and Kansas State. So it gets a little dicey there. But if they can win more games than they did last season, it could be Shedeur's time. And like we know already, NFL scouts are looking at him. They're talking about him potentially being a first-round pick. So would not shock me at all to see Shedeur Sanders here. I honestly also want to shout out Travis Hunter as well.
Yes.
Right now, Travis Hunter, 65-1 on FanDuel. I mean, this guy, there's not much analysis other than turn it on and watch for the eye test, man. Like, this guy is a complete player on both sides of the ball. You don't see that a lot in college football, man. And we saw it, years ago with the guy from Michigan. Oh man, I can't remember his name now. He ended up on the Browns, didn't have a great career, but yes, yeah, Jabril Peppers. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so and people are intrigued by this. The dual threat players people like, especially when you're playing on both sides of the ball. Travis Hunter was on a very good pace last season before taking that dirty hit against Colorado State and kind of getting sidelined for a while. So I think Hunter, just because we like different, we like intrigue. I don't think he can win it. I don't think he's going to win it, but I think maybe you get in on 65-1 and then that price goes down a little bit and then you're sitting out with a cash out. So Will, your thoughts on Colorado and the Buffs as a whole here and our long shots on both Hunter and Shedeur?
I didn't even know that you were going to say Travis Hunter, because the whole time he was talking about Shedeur, I was like, I wonder what Travis Hunter's value is here, because
a lot of the same argument, right?
Yeah. If there's going to be a surprising Colorado team in the playoffs or something like that, I'm sure Travis Hunter would be up there in the voting with Shedeur. So I do like the Travis Hunter take.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'd also like to throw out quickly before we get out of here. I'm a favorite bettor. Eric picks on me all the time for it. I think Carson Beck plus 750 for the favorite this season does feel like a bit of a value. This is one you're holding all season if you do place it, though. Keep that in mind. But I think Georgia has two huge tests on the schedule this season. They go to Tuscaloosa and face Alabama in week 4. I kind of like them catching them earlier, though, with Kalen DeBoer kind of just settling in there as the head coach. So I think maybe they could go into Tuscaloosa, win that game. And then they face Texas later in the season at Texas in Austin. But that's after the week that they're coming off the Red River rivalry game, that is, against Oklahoma. So I think maybe Texas can be a little banged up. We know they lost that game surprisingly last season to Dylan Gabriel and company. So I kind of like how he could maybe catch both these guys on that. So very interested in that. And then also everything I've seen, Georgia is the best team in the country. They lost Ladd McConkey. They lost Brock Bowers, but those guys were both hurt at different times last season. They have Dominic Lovett. They have Ra Thomas still kind of play that 1A, 1B. They also got the number 3 wide receiver in the transfer portal, London Humphreys from Vanderbilt. They also got the wide receiver 8 in the portal from Miami, Colby Young. So I think they are loaded enough to support Carson Beck here. And Eric, I think if he just goes in and he wins in Tuscaloosa and Austin, I mean, that right there builds the case for the Heisman winner coming out of Georgia here in Carson Beck.
Yeah, very, very much so, right? He wins those 2 games and he's going to be considered the favorite, and we're going to see that number slide down quite a bit, which opens the door for a public service announcement to shop around all of these numbers. Yes. I'm seeing a plus 800 number on Carson Beck right now over at DraftKings Sportsbook. I think we've got a promo code in there in our description to go speculate in these markets. And the real thing to underscore with this, you're talking about how Georgia is presumed to be, if not widely, one of the widely considered one of the favorites to be the best team in all of the land. You can actually go over to the futures market. Carson Beck plus 800 to win the Heisman, but Georgia is only plus 320 to win the national title, right?
Wow.
So if you believe that Georgia is winning the national title, Carson Beck probably has a lot to do with that, and you're getting a much more beneficial price by putting in the Heisman ticket than putting in the national title ticket.
Fuck yeah. We're college football analysts, boys. Look at us. Look at us. We've taken the turn. I love it, guys. Let's go ahead. Let's get Kyle in here and let's round out the show with one of our newer segments of the program, a little off the top.
Just a little off the top. Ain't talking about a fade or a crop. Steady hand, know when to stop. Just a little off the top. Whoa, easy now.
All right, just a little off the top. It's our fantasy football and pop culture cut one game. Kyle Scott joining us here to host things. Kyle, how we doing tonight, man?
I'm fantastic. It's a great episode so far. We're all having fun. We're going to keep having fun until the night ends, boys. What do you think?
Let's do it, man. What do you got on tap for us, brother?
Hell yeah, it's summer, as you all can probably tell by the weather outside. So we got some summer themed questions, and as always, some fantasy football. So let's start off with a little classic cookout backyard activity. So you're out cooking some dogs, some burgers, some chicken out on the grill. Maybe you're doing a real barbecue, as Eric would probably.
Yeah.
Uh, what are you doing in the meantime? Are you going to play cornhole, can jam, bocce ball, or spike ball? Can't play one of them. Seth, you are probably one of the biggest fans of backyard games I know. This is probably tough for you. What are you thinking?
Yeah, first of all, I want to shout out Croquet. It's not on here. That's a classy fucking game. Let's keep that in mind. Yeah, so very fond of Can Jam. As you guys know, we're disc golfers on this program. We like to throw a little disc, a little plastic around the yard. So Can Jam stays 100%. Bocce ball is one of the greatest fucking games no one talks about. I was just playing bocce ball about a couple weeks ago here at the house. My parents were in. Katie's parents were in. My parents are in their like mid to late 40s. Katie's parents are in their early 60s. And everyone can play bocce ball. Everyone played bocce ball. Everyone was fired at bocce ball. Katie and I didn't even win a game. And the thing I loved about bocce ball at my house specifically is we use the whole yard. You can keep going around the yard. You don't have to have like a one-track set. I know there are like, boards for bocce ball, but you can kind of do it wherever. It's a great beach game. So I'm not going bocce ball. I'm tough on cornhole and the spike ball. I like cornhole, so cornhole probably is the stage just because it's the classic game. My in-laws, though, their family, not them, but their family is assholes on cornhole. You get a couple runners on those boards who just play all the fucking time, and they're assholes. So cornhole gets a little disrespect from me, but spike ball, it's tough to hold a beer. It's tough to drink. It's tough to kind of move and keep it all liquid. You have to have pretty much sand. I think you need to play on it to be super safe. So yeah, spike ball gets the boot from me. I'm cutting it. Eric, where do you go on these, my friend?
I feel like you are reading my notes on this question verbatim. I have almost nothing to add. Bocce ball. I know you want to show croquet some love. Bocce ball is easily the classiest of all of the backyard games. It is a choice experience. If you have not done it, go out there and get it. Doesn't get its just due, right? In the age of cornhole, in the age of all these backyard games, bocce ball is a timeless classic. You need to work it into your rotation. For me, it was really a decision of kind of choosing between cornhole and bocce ball because they are so similar. But then I went back and I read the question. We're talking about a backyard game here. Spike ball is almost exclusively, in my mind, a beach game, right? Like you need to be able to lay out. And if you're doing that on pavers, if you're doing that on grass, you're not going to have a very good time, right? The sand is certainly the terrain for that. So bit of a technicality, but much like you, I'm crossing spike ball off the list because we're talking about backyard specifically.
Will, where do you go on this? You're a little bit younger, probably a little bit more limber than Eric and Kyle and myself. So you getting down, you laying out for fucking spike ball here, Will?
Yeah, I immediately, when I saw the question, I'm obsessed with cornhole and spike ball. And you kind of made your I'm going to copy your opinion with spike ball on the beach. If we're talking about the beach, I'm taking that at number one because there's, you can lay out and do whatever you want. I also agree that, you can't really hold a beer when you're playing spike ball.
Yeah.
Problematic.
Cornhole, we're going to tailgates and stuff at college. That's literally all I do. If there's a cornhole table, I'm calling.
You're running it.
I'm calling next in line, and I'm going to be there the whole day. Cornhole's number one.
Okay. So are you getting rid of bocce or can jam? Then it sounds like.
I'll probably get rid of bocce just because I played can jam a lot more too. I'm not bad with the disc. Bocce I feel like is more of a game where you can play with everyone. But if we're talking about my skill set, I'm gonna cut bocce because I feel like I'm pretty good at the other three.
Okay. I might bring Bocce to the Fantasy Football Expo, and maybe we'll get down with it there. I don't think I can fit candy in the back of my car with all the shit we'll be bringing. So we'll culture the kid then. How about it, Eric?
Dude, I'm totally for it. I was over here doing the math on how much weight a bocce ball set was going to add to my carry on, and see if I can smuggle it into the airport. But if you're driving, you have to bring the bocce ball. No questions asked.
I'll bring it. Kyle, settle the debate, man. Looks like we have a couple cuts for spike ball and a cut for bocce. Where do you land?
Yeah, I mean, Cornhole is an all-time classic. Everyone's got their own specialty boards, Can Jam, gotta love some discing, because you can also just use the frisbee for something else. You don't
There you
have
go.
to do Can Jam. And as Eric said, bocce ball is the sport of kings. It is the
Undoubtedly.
classiest, it's one of the best sports. It is a sport.
I might just not play enough bocce ball.
Oh, you got to play with the right people, my friend.
The way you laid it out too, Seth, right? The fact that it is boundless, right? You can just kind of migrate your way around the backyard. You can throw that pill far, you can throw it close, right? Like every
Use
round
obstacles,
is a unique adventure, and you feel like you're connecting with like your old Italian ancestry, just smoking cigarettes and tossing bocces around the yard, right?
Yes, 100%. Love it. Kyle, what else do we have here on the summertime docket?
Yeah, so we're going to migrating to some football questions. It is a football show after all. So you're going to cut one of the following contract needing quarterbacks from your Scott Fishbowl 2024 Scott Fishbowl 14 target list. Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, and Tua Tagovailoa. Eric, what do you think?
Ooh, this one kind of hurts a bit because I actually kind of stand for Dak Prescott, but of these three, he's certainly the one that I think that we ought to cut, right? Like he's kind of the first player on the other side of a couple of pretty big tier breaks to where I think you can go 7 picks later in the case of Jordan Love or 27 picks later in the case of Tua Tags and get relatively comparable production, right? So it's much more of a price tag consideration. He's being treated like a top, 6 or 7 quarterback, which, on the whole, he can probably finish right around there yet again, but his upside is limited to the point where I'm not excited about taking him at 20 overall. And also just the gap between QB 7 and QB 15 is much more narrow than the gap between QB 1 and QB 5, for example.
Yeah, I was with you pretty closely, Eric. I initially thought I was going to say Dak because I do think you're paying up for him a little bit more. Like I would love him right around, like we know there's a 3rd round reversal in Scott Fishbowl. So I would love him, right around, I think that early 3rd round. But the fact that you do have to take him like late 2nd round when you probably already have a quarterback on your roster at that ADP, it's tough to want Dak. But still, like we can't deny he does have some rushing upside. I've talked about it also earlier on this program, this offseason that, look, I think the schedule for the Cowboys is going to set up for a big season from Dak and CD. Can the other wide receivers kind of support Dak fully? Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson, and the boys. That's, I think, the question mark for me on Dak is whether he can return value at that price. Tua, though, there was a really cool donation you could have made to someone put Mike Clay's projections into Scott Fishbowl scoring. Tua was QB 21 in that scoring, player 70 overall. So even though you think you're getting a discount at this 47 ADP, I'm going to trust my guy, Kutztown University legend Mike Clay, PA homegrown boy. I'm going to trust him and think that still, I think Tua is maybe being a little bit overdrafted here. Just doesn't have the rushing upside, man. He's a fucking statue back there, even though he knows a little jujitsu nowadays. Will, where do you land on these QBs?
I'm just too big on Dak and Love to get rid of them here. And for me, Dak and Love are both guys that I just look at CJ Stroud and where he's going and think why would I take CJ Stroud here when his price is way more expensive than Dak and Jordan Love? And we've seen Dak and Jordan Love do this. Like Dak was a top 3 quarterback last year. Jordan Love was a top 5 quarterback last year. Both of them, obviously CJ Stroud has a great offense too, but the Cowboys didn't do anything at running back. They're going to be Dak to CD all day long. Jordan Love's got 4 receivers that we don't even know which one is the wide receiver one, and they're getting winning the division hype, dark horse NFC championship hype. Tua for me, he led the NFL in passing last year and still kind of barely cracked the top 10, and it's because of his his lack of rushing upside here, which Dak doesn't have too much of. Jordan Love does have a little bit, but we're gonna have to see an unreal season from Tua for him to have the same upside as these other 2 guys, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think case closed there for me. Eric, any final thoughts? And do you like Tua at that price, Eric? Or are you a little more optimistic? Because I think I am with Will. I mean, the dude was putting on a fucking show with his arm, and still just very hard to crack very highly in scoring in general, let alone Scott Fishbowl scoring while we're getting an extra 0.25 points per carry.
Yeah, the carries definitely drag Tua down, right? Like if you look at the 2023 stats converted into Scott Fishbowl 14 scoring, to your point, Tua is well down the list. I think he's QB 17, and really the thing that is hurting him the most is his 74 rushing yards, right? Everyone else, even some of the lower guys on the docket, Dak Prescott and Jordan Love, 242, 247 rushing yards respectively. So yeah, I mean those 1.25 points tend to add up. Surprisingly, not a lot of first downs coming at the whim of Tua tags, which is kind of interesting. Given his pass volume overall, so maybe we see some regression work in his favor in that regard. But overall, the format does him no favors, right? So not a guy that you want to anchor on in terms of taking him there around pick 40-ish.
Mr. Scampers referring to our last question. Give me lawn darts or give me death. Kyle, I've never played lawn darts actually. Have you frequented the darts of the lawn? And I'm not talking cigs here.
No to both. But I have seen the box from like the 70s in my grandma's house.
Okay.
So
wait, are you telling us right now you might have access to a set of lawn darts?
Potentially.
Man, the IBT house is going to be lousy with yard games come Expo time. You need to pack those bad boys up and bring them out to Canton, my guy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Kyle, round us out here, man, with one final question for a little off the top.
Yeah, up next, I think, is probably one of the hardest questions we've ever asked on one of these kind of games. So you have to cut one of the following films for July 4th. All right. National Treasure, Jaws, The Sandlot, or Independence Day. Will, have you seen all of these movies?
Nope, I was just about to say, not sure I can give you much of an opinion here. I honestly think The Sandlot might be the only one I've seen.
Wow, you haven't seen National Treasure, kid?
No.
Wow. Okay,
if you name a really popular iconic movie, pretty good odds that I haven't seen it. I don't know.
Wow. Okay. Well, if you're going to be one of the co-hosts on this program, we're going to have a lot of homework for you over the next couple months before you head back to college. Kyle, he's got to jump in with National Treasure right away. I mean, fire up Disney Plus tonight, my friend. I mean, talk about a fucking movie that changes lives out there. I mean, Nicolas Cage just puts on a performance of a lifetime. If you like history, I'm kind of a little bit of a history buff myself. I really enjoyed this. I also like a little bit of action, and also just a little bit of fun discovery and treasure hunting as well. So National Treasure stays for me. The Sandlot, fucking iconic. So I don't know if everyone, like, Kyle, do you consider The Sandlot a July 4th movie? Because I do. Like I consider it. Yeah, I consider a summer movie, July 4th movie. Fucking, love everything about the Sandlot. If you don't like the Sandlot, you're an asshole. So I think it would come down to Jaws and Independence Day for me. I would probably cut Independence Day. Like, I just don't see myself sitting down on 4th of July and watching Independence Day. If I wanted to watch a movie that was a little more action packed, just fire up Top Gun Maverick and I'll be good. So, yeah, or even like Born on 4th of July, Platoon. Like, there's a lot of like war movies. I know Independence Day isn't necessarily a war movie, but I just don't want to go like, sci-fi here, if that makes sense, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, but your suggestions to me don't make sense either. Uh, Born on the 4th of July is not like a feel-good movie, Seth.
It's
Platoon is
badass movie.
not like
TC,
a
bro.
feel-good movie either. Dude, he loses his legs. He's
Yeah.
betrayed by the country.
Sheesh.
He gave his life for his country, and he was betrayed. Platoon, he gets shot by his own men, dude. Come on now.
Yeah. Come on.
I think we're slowly uncovering that Seth is just a sicko. Something lighthearted like this guy getting dismembered or losing his life in service.
Yeah,
Hey.
or something, depressing like Independence Day with Will Smith and Bill Paxton.
I don't know. Maybe it was the slap heard around the world that turned me off to Will Smith. Eric, how do you feel about Independence Day, Natty Treasure, Jaws, and Sandlot? What are you cutting here?
Man, I stand to only muddy the waters further. Some of this feels like the GOAT conversation in the NBA. Is it LeBron or is it Michael Jordan? You're basically saying, are you older or younger than 35? But for me, Sandlot and Independence Day are absolutely in. Nostalgia vibes are through the roof. The cast on Independence Day is choice. You cannot argue that objectively. So really, I'm making a decision between crossing off National Treasure and crossing off Jaws. And
Don't do it, you son of a bitch. Don't do
look,
it, you
dude,
son of a bitch.
Like I'll give deference to the iconic nature of Jaws, and also National Treasure just isn't a good movie. Nicolas Cage is weird. There, I said it. He's not for me.
Nicolas Cage is brilliant, and if you don't like him, the guy who plays Riley is also brilliant, and their dad also really great too. So yeah, fuck you on that one. That's a big fuck you. That's wow. But Kyle, are you also gonna bury one of my top 5 favorite films all time here?
Please,
That's a top.
please don't leave me on
5.
this island.
Easy top 5. Not even. I would almost put 2 maybe in my top 10 as well.
Okay.
Did Seth write this question just so he can talk about National Treasure?
Apparently I need to, because the disrespect for National Treasure out there on a national scale is real. It seems like Will hasn't even seen the program, and Kyle and Eric out here just taking shots at Nicolas Cage, Diana Kruger and company. What the fuck's happening here?
Hey, I haven't taken any shots at it yet. I'm just surprised it's a top 5.
Dude, it's good. It's good, man.
It's fine.
Where else?
While you're playing bocce ball,
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Very, very good point.
Your sisters are in the house helping make dinner. Jaws is just one of the best movies ever made. National Treasure is fine. Sandlot rocks. Independence Day can go.
Wow. Okay. All right. Why the hate on Independence Day? The slap heard around the world also turn you off from Willie?
No, it's just a little too. It's too involved. You have to watch it too far along before anything good happens.
It's a good point. It's a slow roll.
Slow burn,
It's a
for sure.
Yeah, slow jag for sure. Well, guys, what a fucking program. Will, I hope we didn't turn you off to the IBT family too much, man. Thank you for joining us, dude. Tell us where we can find you and all the other work you're doing, not just for us here at IBT, but in the greater fantasy football community in general, my friend.
Yeah, so most of my stuff I go on Instagram and TikTok videos, which would be Fantasy Fortune. Usually post about 3 a day. Try to stick to mostly fantasy football, and then just some of my random NFL takes, and then I'll post some threads out on Twitter as well with all my fantasy research at Starlipper NFL. So those are my three go-to if you want to see some of my content.
Eric, what do you have cooking the rest of the week, man? I know you're plugged into a couple different outlets out there. What are we talking here as we approach the end of June?
Yeah, the number of outlets that I'm plugged into seemingly no bounds. So the best way to find all of it is over on my personal Twitter, which is @FantasyNav. A fair amount of shit posting, an equal amount of retweeting various forms of charity leagues, and then my my original productions, my content itself sprinkled in there. So @FantasyNav on Twitter is the best place to find all of it.
Fuck yeah. Pros with Joe's coming up this offseason, baby. Hopefully I get invited back because last 2 times I've been ghosted by my Joe because I'm shitty at this apparently, and they don't like our
guy.
Yeah.
We gotta put you through pro boot camp. We gotta make sure that you give the concierge experience.
Apparently,
give your Joes the warms and fuzzies.
Yeah, apparently I'm not the most hospitable pro over there for sure. Or, I don't even know. Maybe I should be a Joe this year. That's where I'll go with it. Kyle, thank you as always, brother, for tuning in with us and making sure we're sounding crispy and shit over here. We appreciate you as always. The easiest way to support Kyle and myself, subscribe to the In Between Media channel. Also check out the In Between Media website. We got a lot of great content for you over there between our fantasy football, NFL betting content, as well as our NASCAR betting and DFS initiative, our PGA content, and our entertainment stuff as well. So make sure you're checking that all out at inbetweenmedia.com. You can also find Kyle on Twitter. You're not hacked right now, Kyle, right? Like you're not retweeting disrespectful shit like you were a couple months ago when you were hacked.
Nope, it's all good.
Okay, dude, I got some DMs about Kyle throwing out some crazy shit on Twitter, and yeah, pretty sure you got hacked.
Talking mess on National Treasure.
Yeah, throwing out some crazy RTs. But you can also find me on Twitter @between_SethFF, but just hang out here on YouTube and check out our clips and everything else instead. But all right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Keep it in between. Thank you.